Hello, welcome to another episode of Unlocked. I'm Skot, and here we talk about unlocking the potential of people. And we're going to do that today with Tricia Broderick. Keep saying Tricia Broderick. It's that Broderick part. Tricia Broderick. And she just finished a book, Lead Without Blame, where we are going to talk about that topic today because it is so relevant in this world. And she says and she says it in here. Well, actually, I'm not even going to spoil it. She says something that is really interesting that, people don't go into a leadership meeting with this goal. And I'll let you hang on to see what that goal is. But it's like, yeah, nobody goes into meetings like that, but yet that's what we do. So that's a little cliffhanger for you. Lead without blame. So how do we create cultures? How do we be leaders that don't lead with blame and shame, as she says? Well, there's two main things they hit on in this book, motivators, and then also resiliency, and how those things go into creating cultures that build people up and create this idea of co-intelligence and collaboration and other topics that we discuss in this interview. So it's really, really good. She has a ton of experience in this space and she has a lot of value to add. So pay attention, get your notepad out, or just listen really closely because it's gonna be awesome. Here we come, Tricia. Tricia, let's do this. You ready?
Yes.
Okay. You got your workout in this morning. You look great.
I did.
Ready to roll.
The benefits of the being at home, I can quickly get online afterwards.
That's right. That is right. Yeah. I was just like, oh my gosh, I got my kids on the bus and then I was like, oh man, I gotta get on this interview. And my wife's like trying to talk to me for a second. I was like, nope, gotta go, so
like I could get 2 more minutes in, I can go.
Yep. That's what it is. Well, speaking of doing a million things at the same time, you are at the time of this recording about to launch your book, right? How you feeling?
It's surreal. It still feels all so like, I even now physically have copies of it and I still feel like, is this really happening? Like it's crazy. Never did I have this as a goal. So I'm still like, wow, this happened. And I got to do it with Diana Larsen. Like I'm just still in shock, I think.
So how did that happen?
When that will stop.
Well, tell me how that happened. Like, how did it come up where all of a sudden, you do a lot of training, you do a lot of facilitation of workshops with leaders and teams and all these other, and then you're like, oh yeah, Diana Larsen. Oh, let's write this book. Like, how did that happen?
So it's actually, I feel very lucky. A publisher with Barrett Kohler, Charlotte, had seen me speak at a conference and she's like, I want you to write something. And I'm like, look, I can speak for days. Writing, I'm not so sure you want me doing. and so I kind of like, blah, blah, yeah, right. And year after year, she came back and she really just wouldn't give up on me, and then I started having conversations with a few people like Mike Cohn and Esther Derby. I'm like, what, with all my fears of why I don't know if I want to write a book. And they were so encouraging and helpful with kind of negating some of my fears, but I still was like, no. And I'll do it someday. And just continuing to kick that can right down the road. And then Charlotte had reached out to me again and said, how about now? And this was just before COVID. And I said, well, I don't think I want to do it by myself. She goes, I have somebody, maybe you know her, that also doesn't want to write by themselves. And I was like, well, who? And she says, Diana Larsen. I'm like, well, okay then. And Diana and I had known each other for years and whatnot. So we got together and went, do we have anything in like, what would you be looking to share? And what would I be looking? Is there synergy there? Is there something there? So we did a couple test kind of runs of topics and thoughts and where we were. And it quickly was pretty apparent that there was something there that we both not just individually had to share, but that there was something there with a synergy that seemed powerful. So we went for it. So that's actually how it came about. It was truly co-writing. It was truly emergent. It was kind of everything we talk about, at least in the agile space. But it was, I feel very lucky that I had multiple people kind of not give up on doing this, and then the just stars aligned for this to come down.
That is so cool. I mean,
Yeah.
and then to actually come together and feel that synergy, like right off the bat, that's a gift. And that's really, really awesome. And that she didn't give up on you, which, and you said years, like she was hunting you down for years.
Yeah.
So that's pretty cool. So what was so impactful during your talk that she was like, what were you talking about? Like, what was the topic? Do you remember?
I honestly don't even know a number of them. I mean, I've done so many different ones. I think she attends the Agile Alliance conference the most, but I'm not even sure if honestly, don't even know which sessions. I mean, I always speak kind of on leadership. I always have this storytelling approach. I'm always I pick my sessions on what can I say that others might not want to admit or not able to say yet. So they're always very slightly embarrassing to me, but they're raw and they're vulnerable and they're honest in terms of challenges that people face, teams face, organizations face, and hopefully a little inspiring and motivating. I think it was the storytelling aspect of myself, and that really, and because we very much incorporated a lot of stories in this book. So I'm going to guess that, but honestly, I don't know if I have even asked her.
Okay.
I don't know if I even wanted to know what was going to burst that bubble for me.
That's cool. Well, you're setting me up because now you're telling me that you're an amazing storyteller. No pressure. But I'm going to want to feel, I'm going to want a story out of you before this interview is over. So I'm just going to give you time to think, because I know I didn't prep you for that. So you've got them in there, right? I just want you to think about, as we talk about this, I want you to weave something in. Okay. Weave something in. Okay. So, all right. So you talk about,
no pressure.
No pressure.
That's like when the first keynote I ever had to do. I mean, generally my talks tend to be more motivational and things, but the minute you were like, be motivational, I had nothing.
No, it's like, I'm really good at that. Okay, do it now. And it's like, wait, you want me to do what?
It's probably how comedians feel, like, tell a joke right now.
I know. It's like, we used to do that with my friend growing up. He was like super funny, right? A super funny kid. And then kids would come up to him and go, hey, be funny. Like, do that funny thing you do. And he's like, what are you talking? I don't know. Like, you freeze. So, all right. So you talk about, well, first of all, your book is called Lead Without Blame. We haven't mentioned that yet. Lead Without Blame. So
I'm such a great marketer.
Yeah, I know. Well done. I did it for you. I
feel bad for Diana. I'm trying, Diana. I'm trying.
I try. She's trying, Diana. And by the way, it's on Amazon. I'll just go ahead and get that out for you too. If you're listening to this after it launches, it's on Amazon. So you go there and pre-order as well, right?
Yeah. Sorry, I muted just a quick second. My dog was going ballistic for a second.
I love dogs and kids. They're awesome.
We rescued a second dog during COVID, which really wasn't a great idea, because then they just feed off each other and bark even more. So, great idea. Rescuing, nice. Good idea. Second dog.
Second dog.
But yes, it is on pre-order, but it's officially available, I think, the 27th.
Okay,
so
cool.
Like less than a week, man. Less than a week.
Yeah. Well, by the time this gets out, it'll already be out. So correct. There you go. Yeah. There you go. All right. So you talk about
it's on Amazon, Barrett Kohler, Target, a number of different Barnes and Noble sites.
Okay, cool. So you talk about, I'm going to come back to the book a little bit, but your topic is interesting to me because you talk about agile, but then you talk about leadership too. So where's your background really stem from, and where do you focus, and how do you marry those two? What's your formula?
Yeah. So I like to say it's interesting. I like to say I got lucky because I actually started using what is now called an agile framework, extreme programming, in 1999. Pre the manifesto, pre-agile, or what the community of agile is known. at the time. And then I fast forward, still didn't know anything about Agile or anything. And then in 2005, I started using Scrum, still not knowing anything about Agile, but we started using Scrum on a huge government project. I learned all the ways to fake Scrum in 2005. I was a pro at it. And but I started getting very involved in the Agile community around 2007. And I stayed consistently involved in the community. And for a lot of people, Agile was software. Agile was processed or methodology and these kinds of things, but it never was for me. For me, right, almost instantly, I ended up realizing how bad of a leader I was. I mean, sure, I had good parts and things like that. And generally, I made good relationships with people, but I think my relationships and my personality compensated for the horrible micromanager I was. and with good intent, not maliciously, but my need for control, my need to deliver, my reputation that I had built on those things didn't make me a very good leader for people who have to discover value, for what we call knowledge workers. And so instantly for me, the Agile community leveled up my leadership. And that's really what it has been for a very long time, is continuing to think about, how am I a better leader? How do I facilitate? How do I coach? How do I train? How do I speak and be impactful? And how do I not be what I call the hub, the person that makes sure everything gets done and doesn't scale, doesn't really share ownership with the team, doesn't really create an environment where you get the best results in discovering value. And so for me, Agile and leadership, it's not different. Agile space for me is about growth. It's about learning. It's about exploring to discover what works, what's valuable, what's going to make a difference. And so I don't honestly care what framework you use, what practices you do, if you do it in what parts of the thing. I care about that essence. And so a lot of times I will call myself I do call myself a leadership advisor, and I use a lot of the Agile concepts and practices and frameworks to support the type of leadership that I want to see more in this world. Because for me, it's not just software, it's not just a technique, it is truly an approach, and one that has completely leveled up my ability to help others, my ability to create spaces of where people can really collaborate and build together and discover together. And so for me, it's just together. It's all things that are part of that world for me.
So do you talk about, and I'm going to throw this term out there, agile leadership? Does that make sense? Do you use that term? Do other people use that term? Like, is it out there? And
people do. And I do. I have I co-teach with a colleague of mine, Jake Calabrese, and we teach a class called Leading Amazing Teams, but it has a certification under agile leadership. But for us, a lot of times agile leadership, it should just be leadership, whether you're doing agile or you're not doing agile. Like if you think like it's the leadership that we need to be going towards. But for me, it very much incorporates a lot of the agile principles and values and things along those lines. So I have used the term. I don't as much anymore personally. It's why I don't call myself an agile leadership advisor, because I do think there's a little bit of a box people put you in with the agile part versus using that to reinforce ultimately what you're trying to do is create successful results.
okay. And I guess I was thinking of like, not necessarily putting you in, and this is where my brain goes, right? Like big picture kind of thinking. It's like, and it's not necessarily putting you as far as being a leader in the agile space, but what would the concept of agile leadership mean, right? Like what is, like anybody could be an agile leader, whether you're, running a snow cone factory or, whether you run a tech company, right? Like I guess I was thinking around those realms. Yeah.
I just don't have the need to put the agile label on top of that. For me, that just should be leadership. I get that it's different than maybe what some people experience as leadership today, but sometimes I feel like putting a label on the front of it to get people to like, I didn't need a label in front of it to realize my leadership was poor and I needed to evolve it. Right. And so I'm kind of
100%. Yeah.
careful about putting that label on it to imply that it's something new. No, it should have been there all along. And we just weren't doing it very well, or we weren't being taught. We were leading the way others led us, right? And so just kind of ticking away at that and chipping away at that, and getting to a place where leaders going forward really are creating spaces and environments where people can be more than what they even are today.
Okay. So when you're writing this book, right? You talk about this blame and shame leadership style, right? Blame and shame. Tell me about that. Why is that so central? Because that's a central concept to this book. And why did you pick that? You and Diana are getting together, you're talking, you're sharing ideas about, hey, what do I bring? What do you bring? And then you're like, let's talk about blame. That's it, right? And then you're like, blame and shame, right? What is that?
So here's the thing. I don't think I've ever sat in a senior leadership meeting where people went, how do we make everybody miserable today? Like, that's never been a discussion I have ever been a part of. Maybe it exists, but I have never sat in a room where people are like, who and how can we make people miserable today? And yet, there are so many things in organizations that even with some good intent lead to blaming and shaming behaviors and impacts. Whether it's a postmortem, the after death meeting, like literally we're calling meetings after death and then wondering why people are gearing up with their fingers ready to point, right? Where we say phrases like, who's the single throat to choke? Right. And we say these kind of phrases in the workplace. And if you peel it back and you go, okay, what's the good intent? Well, the good intent is people are trying to hold others accountable. The good intent is they're trying to make sure we're making progress. The good intent is that we want to learn from our mistakes and not make them again. Right. But there's a lot of myths associated to a lot of those stances that ultimately lead to blaming and shaming in an organization that causes the very opposite of what your ultimate goal is. If your ultimate goal is getting results and satisfying customers, right? Blaming and shaming, and regardless if that's really you're setting out trying to do, the result of that, the impact of that is actually countering people's creativity and innovation and engagement, period. And so we wanted to tackle it from a place of not going while I'm going, you are blaming people. We wanted to tackle it from a place of when you do this, this is what results. When you walk in and you focus more on how to make sure we never make a mistake again, you prevent experimentation. You limit people's willingness to be and try something new because they're going to get hammered if they make a mistake that they're going to get penalized for it. They're going to have their performance reviews going to be knocked. And so if you're sending these messages that perfection is what is expected, not learning, and yet you're in an environment where you have to discover value, where you need learning, then all you've done is created an environment where you will not succeed, where you will not get the outcomes you're looking for. And so we really came at it from a place of, oh my gosh, I'm doing that. I didn't realize it, right? Like, and kind of how I felt when I started this journey a little bit like, ooh, I need to go apologize to a few people today because I didn't understand. And I'll give you an example. And one I've talked about before is I had a team that had to mark up a document, right? And we had to deliver this document. If we delivered this document, it had so many defects, we'd get an actual financial penalty. So as a leader, we often feel that extra stress and that accountability, right? Like, I got to make sure this is good. There's a financial responsibility, right? So I would take this document. When I say document, I'm talking, it's a thick double-sided document. I would take it home with me and I'd mark up every single mistake. And this is the days we were doing, Scrum, but we were so not doing Scrum. We had a huge detailed specification design document. And so it was like, here's the mocked up screen view of it, and then the use case below it, right? So 2005. And if the screen said save on the button, but the wording below said submit, I would mark it up with my red pen and I would highlight it and do it. And I would take all these errors. I'd spend the whole weekend marking it up, take it back to the team. They would fix it. And then the next document came and I took it home, and I'm realizing that there's even more mistakes. Like there's even more errors, and I am livid, right? So I'm going back in and I'm like, what is this? And I will never forget. I will own it. I wasn't intentionally shaming, but I was like, come on, your reaction to me being upset about this should be, oh, I'm so sorry, we will do better, right? Like that was in my head at that time, what I was expecting as a reaction. And instead, I'll never forget, one of the subject matter experts turned and looked at me and goes, we just got to get it close enough. We know you like finding this kind of stuff. No more red pen, Tricia. Like, I am sorry, this is not happening anymore. I am not looking at the next one. And instantly, the minute I stopped, the quality of the document shot up, right? Because they had ownership of it. And so I think that there's so many times that us as leaders, we're doing it with the right intent, but we don't realize our behavior, our engagement actually is stealing that ownership that's impacting whether or not we're getting those results. If you had asked me, was I blaming or shaming them in those moments? No, I was trying to help, right? Like I didn't understand what that was really creating and what I should have been focusing on instead. and so that's an example of it. And so we wrote it with that perspective of, hey, leader, you're not a bad person. You're a good person. You want the right things. Just nobody maybe has ever highlighted how to better go about it.
That is no red pen Tricia anymore.
No.
No,
I wrote it. I even wrote an apology post of I'm sorry for the red pen. And
wow, we get it this far because we know you like, what was it? We get it this far because we know you like to do that.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's how you're adding value, right? And they weren't, it wasn't malicious. It wasn't mean. It wasn't disrespectful. It was, we're stressed and we're like, you're doing it. So all we know is we got to get it close enough. And I'm like, no.
Well, yeah, here's the mentality, right? And it goes into, they know you're going to do that anyway. So they're probably like, why do I even bother trying to make it perfect? Trisha's
I've got these 20 other things to do, right? Yeah. Like they were loaded with a ton of work as well. So it wasn't that. I think that's the hard part is people hear the words blame and shame and they think people are being maliciously evil or manipulative. And the reality is it doesn't take much to have that feeling and that sense in an organization, which is going to shut down creativity, collaboration, engagement.
Yeah, for sure. You talk about, there's two main sections of your book. Correct me if I'm wrong. You talk about motivators and you talk about resiliency. Yes. Is that correct?
Yes. Well, it was interesting. We really started the focus of the book when Diana and I were writing it was on the second part, the resiliency factors and what it means. Because when we were coming at it initially, like I said, this truly emerged. When we were coming at it, we were thinking, how come so many teams that felt like they were performing the minute COVID hit just dramatically went right back to working as like groups, like where they were doing handoffs and they stopped building their co-intelligence. They stopped building and collaborating together. They were like, you do this part, you do this part. And all of a sudden the results started diminishing and just not good. And so we're like, what things were leaders not focused on that didn't help the team deal with chaos and and stay resilient in their learning and working collaboratively together. So we really focused a lot on the part 2. And I think for most Agilists who have been in that community for a long time, it's going to be part 2. That's going to be this is where I got to go. But as we were doing part 2, it didn't feel right because we're like, it seems like it's a huge jump to get to these topics when we haven't talked about the essential motivators that you need to even get them to a place where they're willing to collaborate. And so we ended up going back and adding in part 1, where we really talk about, as a leader, it isn't walking around trying to fix everything with a red pen. It's what has to be true in the environment for that team to start coming together, to start wanting to collaborate. Then you can, once you got a team working as a team, now you can take them to that next level and thinking about the resilience with these other factors. So part 1 is going to be a lot for maybe people who have no exposure to, a lot of the agile principles and concepts and have had more of a traditional leadership training and expectations. We've heard from a lot of people that, because we went across the spectrum with people reviewing this, and they're always like, I haven't even gotten to part 2. And then a lot of Agilists are like, it was part 2 that really, oh my gosh, I never thought to work on that. So that's ended up being how we ended up creating 2 parts to the book with it is we realized it seemed too big of a jump for non-Agile people jumping into the resilience factors.
So in that first section of the motivators part, you talk about purpose, autonomy, and co-intelligence.
Yeah.
So explain those, unpack those for us, those words, right? Those aren't normal everyday words we throw around all the time. So what are you talking about when you talk about those?
So a lot of people are familiar with it, and it's built off of existing work. And I want to make sure we acknowledge that, because Daniel Pink has drive out there that was purpose, mastery, and autonomy for knowledge, cognitive-based skill workers. David Marquet created, I think it's competence, control, and clarity, all very similar concepts. And initially we were going to just kind of highlight those as these are the essential motivators that you need to have. But as Diana and I were writing and talking, we realized that mastery and competence from the initial works, there was something not quite right there when we were talking about teams. And so if we start focusing as leaders of just making sure everybody's building their mastery and their competence, it can actually lead to more individual group-like behaviors, right? Well, I'm an expert, I'm skilled, I'm growing. And yet we always say things like the best results are from the wisdom of the crowd. The best results are from collaboration. And so we really wanted to put more of an emphasis still on the learning, still on the capabilities, but we leveled it up to teams into co-intelligence. And co-intelligence is where you bring a set of mastery and competence. I bring a set of mastery and competence. And together we have some integrated elements, right? We can cover more spectrum. But actually together, when we start collaborating, we unlock a whole new set of potential that our combination creates also. So it's not just hey, you're knowledgeable in this area and I'm knowledgeable in this area, so now we're knowledgeable in 2 areas. No, we have a third possibility that is new and different and innovative potentially all in itself. In a lot of ways, it's exactly how the book formed. Diana's experiences, my experiences, and then together our co-intelligence unlocked so much more from our collaboration in terms of, and then this idea, and I never thought about how that applied. And as a result, we found new insights and things that neither one of us independently could have ever done by ourselves. It was that co-intelligence coming together. And so when we are thinking about it in terms of building teams, it didn't feel enough to just say mastery or competence. We took it up and going, you really want to emphasize the co-intelligence, because that's when you're tapping into that wisdom of the crowd and really building that shared ownership in terms of what can you discover together, not just individually.
Wow. So you took the principle and you lived it writing the book, the co-intelligence idea.
100%.
I love that.
We had a shared meaningful purpose. We had autonomy and working together in terms of what her needs were, what my needs were in terms of safety and being able to share information and how we were going to do this together. And then, we built co-intelligence as we were going forward. So 100%.
So how does that principle, before we jump on to the second part, how does that principle help us lead without blame?
When you have, and I'll break it with each one of them specifically. So when you have a shared meaningful purpose, people understand more of the context of why they're doing it. They're more invested, they're more engaged. So that feeling and that pressure, a lot of times for leaders of like, you have the context of what's happening and why it's happening. So it's easier for you to make decisions. Well, when you open that up and you're giving that purpose and that shared meaningful things, people are more engaged. They're more understanding of why they're doing it. And they're making now better decisions with it. So that need to walk around and control, or that need starts to diminish. Autonomy. A lot of people think of autonomy and they do stupid things like this. You're empowered, and then they just walk away. That just makes people feel like a bus got aimed at them. And so with autonomy, it's building two-way trust. It's helping people realize what decisions they can make, what decisions do you still want to put some guardrails in as a leader, so that you don't come in and just do the veto. That feels like shaming. That feels like you're blaming them for making the wrong choices, right? So you're really building up some clear understanding of what they have a control over in a two-way mechanism that avoids some of that blame and shame. And then with co-intelligence, here's the interesting thing. Anytime I've watched people truly start collaborating, building their co-intelligence, I have watched and experienced myself as a leader went, oh, they're so much better than me. There's so much. Oh my gosh.
I've never experienced that ever, Tricia. I'm pretty much the best at everything I do. So, it's pretty hard. I'm just kidding.
Like, you're sitting there. I remember one of my teams came up with this like whole initiative, and I was like, oh my gosh, that is so much better than I would have thought of myself. And when you get that reaction, then your trust level increases to where your focus now more is not on making sure everything's right. It's how do you keep lifting up? And so those needs, those behaviors start diminishing with that too.
That's brilliant. I love it. Love it. Okay. So let's move on to that second part. So you talk about inclusive collaboration. Well, this is with resilience. Okay. Under the bucket of resilience, right? We talk about,
you have them collaborating, but you're still kind of the hub, or it's just not strong yet. Right. And so these are the next level of things that you need to be focusing on to help level that team up again.
Cool. So inclusive collaboration, transparent power dynamics, collaborative learning, and embracing conflict is kind of the topics you kind of hit on in this section. So package those up for me. You don't have to go through each one necessarily, but like those things, how do those help us build resilience and then be able to lead without blame?
Yeah. So there are a lot of other, and I want to be clear, like people are like, well, she doesn't talk about strategy or anything. Look, most people know that they need to do strategy, right? Like we ended up really talking about things that, what are the things that people kind of avoid? Conflict, right? What are the things that people ignore? Inclusivity, right? What are the things that tend to be a little bit more hidden or not acknowledged as much, that are really going to wreak havoc the minute chaos is ensuing? And so we centered around these four as that. Honestly, we could probably do a whole nother secondary book of like other ones but these were the top ones that we kind of came back that we felt like when we watched teams disintegrate or the blaming and shaming start really ratcheting up again, it was some element of one of these four that was creating some of the problems. So when we talk about collaborative connection, people experience this in COVID a lot, is like, they didn't feel the relationships anymore, right? Like you weren't just saying, hey, how are you? It was like, get on the Zoom, have the meeting, get off Zoom, right? Like, and the problem is it gets really easy if you're not paying attention to the connection that's there. Well, then it gets really hard to keep collaborating. It gets really hard to, I will own, I have gotten an email request from somebody that I wasn't I had not talked to in a while. And I was like mentally, visually drawing horns on that person's head because I was like, how dare they ask me this? And how dare and when you don't take time to tune the connection, the relationships within the team, it gets easy to start writing narratives. Oh, they're trying to make me look bad. They're trying, like they think they're out for themselves. And our brains are magical, creative, endless narratives that when we don't have other experiences or interactions, those narratives will take over, and they're not always in a positive way, which can lead to that blaming, shaming, not just from leadership, but from with each other as well, or yourself. Then we kind of went, okay, so if they're paying attention to building their relationships, are they really being inclusive about it? And, I grew up with the expectation there were taboo topics in the workplace. And one of those was talking about, diversity and equity, inclusion, and certain topics. And I went right along with it. I was like, no, we don't talk about that, right? What I didn't understand, even though I was experiencing it myself on certain intersectionality levels, was I can't be my full creative, innovative self if I don't feel a sense of belonging. And at the end of the day, when we do not recognize a whole person, when we do not create not just space at the table, but actually space to engage, to feel heard, to be seen, to participate and collaborate. I might have been really good at opening doors, but I had this like, oh, we're agile, we all just collaborate. Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry to so many people that I probably left hanging because I didn't understand that we were not necessarily in creating that truly inclusive environment. And so we really tackle it. We actually brought in Jamaro Nova Mitchell as a DEI contributor and an editor in our book to, one, look at the entire book, but also to help us write this chapter and to help us engage with how do we stop making these topics taboo in the workplace and really lean into creating an inclusive environment.
Wow. Another example, co-intelligence, collaboration, right?
Yep. 100%.
So good. Well done. Really cool. So I told you I was going to want a story out of you. You gave me one earlier. So you're off the hook, unless you have something else you want to. Do you have another story? Do you have a story? You're like, you just like, I can't wait to tell the story when Skot asked me about telling a story.
I didn't think of a story. I don't even remember which stories I told already. No, I'll highlight it off the last two with conflict and power. I think there are so many times that I personally, as a leader, tried to diminish, like, oh, conflict, I like conflict, it's fine, I have no problems, I embrace conflict. And power, I'm just one of the team, right? And the problem is when you dismiss or invalidate the very reality of something, you actually create more problems for it. And I have experienced that over and over again. And I was like, no, nobody sees me as powerful. And then everybody's creating this narrative of like, she's doing it for this, and she screwed me over, and I'm not getting this position. And then I'm hurt, right? As a leader. But I'm not supposed to be allowed to be hurt because I'm servant leader. I'm focused on everybody else, but I'm a person. I'm a human being. And so I want to highlight a lot with these resilience factors is they're not just for the team. But I found, while I worked on these resilience factors, they helped me as a leader find peace. They helped me as a leader to understand better why mixed messages were happening, or why I was getting this judgment, or why these assumptions were happening. And in doing that, I was able to let go of some of it to focus still more on what the ultimate goal always was helping. Right? Helping yourself, but helping the team, helping the customers. And so in a lot of ways, that's been the interesting experience for me in doing this book with Diana, is it helped me to even understand a lot too of like, oh, that's why. And it ended up building some of my own resilience, which I don't necessarily think that was the goal in any form or fashion. And yet I think sometimes as leaders, we get so focused on helping everybody else, we forget to focus on helping ourselves too.
Love it. Love it. And here at the end,
is it time already?
Oh my gosh. I know. It's fun talking to me. I get it, Tricia. I get it. So I'm just kidding. But I think that what you have here is you have some background experience that not a lot of people in this space have, right? I'm in this space with you, and I definitely don't have that experience that you have. Of course, I bring other experiences that I have, but your experience fits with that certain client that needs you right now, right? And so I think that if people want to hire you to come train them, come speak to them at an event, whatever you're doing, how do they get in touch with you? Obviously, the book is out there. We talked about that. Target, Barnes and Noble, wherever you get books, Amazon. It's going to be there. Lead Without Blame. But where do people get in touch with you?
So they can get in touch directly with me on my site, which is igniteii.com. Or we also, Diane and I, have leadwithoutblame.com. That has a contact form on there as well to reach out for myself and or Diana too with it.
Okay, brilliant. Give me okay, no pressure. Gosh, I keep putting you under pressure. I keep doing this. I'm sorry. Because I know that you're capable. That's what it is. I have so much faith in you. Give me like a tweetable moment. I need something I need a drop here at the end. It's like, be funny. I'm just kidding, Tricia, but it's like, do that thing, that you do. What is something you want to leave everybody with? What's the idea that we're going to leave everybody with here?
Oh, this is okay. Well, so you're adding the extra thing. You're not just saying, give me that final thought. You're making it tweetable. Now I'm in my head with that. So leadership is hard. The only way you fail is by not continuing to learn.
There it is. I knew it. See, I knew you could do that.
I have no idea. And now, meanwhile, my logical brain is trying to count how many words that and characters.
Yeah, I know. Here's the thing. We say tweetable moment. I don't care what platform you're going to do, right? It doesn't matter. Thank you so much, Tricia. You've been awesome. I appreciate it. I know that I've gotten some stuff out of this. I'll sum it up for people here in a bit. But thank you for adding your wisdom, for co-intelligencing with us, and being awesome. Good job.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
Okay, those two main buckets that we talked about. Motivators, we talked about resiliency. Under the motivators part, it's purpose autonomy. Understand why we do what we do. Are we all on the same page? Are we all believe that we're here for a reason and a purpose? And then co-intelligence. How do I understand what I bring to the table, what you bring to the table, and how we bring those things together to create better teams that are healthier and that are moving everybody forward. And then we talk about resiliency, inclusive collaboration, transparent power dynamics, collaborative learning, and embracing conflict. And those components are really, really essential to us understanding how do we build trust in one another, because a lot of this, and she said it in here too, in so many words, but this whole blaming culture comes because we don't trust each other. Ultimately, right? We don't trust each other. And that is a huge component that comes down to a foundational element of communication. If we learn to communicate better, communicate thoroughly, and understand ourselves, be more self-aware, we will build better trusting relationships that are going to also decrease that level of blame and shame inside of our cultures. I really liked that idea that nobody sits in a meeting discussing how we're going to make everybody miserable today, right? But ultimately we do that because we're accidental in our leadership, and in the way we communicate, we're accidental. And that's what happens. And that's what destroys teams and destroys cultures inside of teams. So Tricia, thank you. Good luck on the book launch and everything you're doing. If y'all want to find out more about me, you can go to skotwaldron.com. I've got all my blogs listed there, all these shows, as well as some other insights for you. And if you'd like me to come speak at your event, you can find out more there as well. Find me on LinkedIn, connect with me there, like, subscribe, comment on my YouTube channel, all the stuff. Just do all the stuff, please. I would love it. I'd love to collaborate with you. Okay. Thanks, everybody. And I'll see you next time on another episode of Unlocked.